And good morning, guys. Welcome back to the channel, back with the Wandering Mariner. So today we're talking a little bit about how to get a job as a merchant mariner. So a lot of people that are watching my channel and you guys that are here asking a lot of great questions are asking, after I get my documents, how do I get a job? How does this all work? This is so confusing. So I want to kind of get into it. And first I want to talk about some of the kind of misconceptions and untruths about the merchant mariner field and you getting a job as a merchant mariner. So there's a lot of romanticism about joining the merchant marine and traveling and seeing the world and going to exotic locations and sitting on beaches and having all these great adventures of going all over the world, which can happen. However, the reality is that typically merchant mariners, when they go to other countries, they are going to different docks, industrial ports, places that are not as exotic as one would think. And, I think it's important that you kind of understand that you're not going to tourist locations. Typically, tourist locations for us are typically far away from where you're at. You're at a place that's meant to work. And most companies, the whole purpose of you being on a ship and working is to make money. And those companies are moving cargo around the world, and it's this repetition. You are kind of the modern day truck driver of the ocean, and you're just moving the cargo from point A to point B, unloading, offloading, and and maintaining the vessel. And that's not exactly fit the romanticized thought process of what happens when people get into the maritime industry. And it's really important that you understand that a majority of mariners' travel that they get is typically when they are off, when they're on vacation time. Like, they get a taste for it when they're traveling around the world. They're like, wow, this place looks real beautiful. I want to come back here. And they come back. Or sometimes they get shore leave and they get out and they get a chance to explore a little bit. But your main purpose, typically while those ships are there, is to work. And quite often, many ports that I pulled into, nobody got off the ship. We just loaded the cargo and left. There was places that we went, like Denmark and Ireland and, all over the world, that we were just in and out. And there was no time off. And when you work for the unions, there's really no time off. The union work is specifically for you to make money for the company. And that's why the companies are there. So this kind of all tethers into the idea of how do you go about getting a job. And that's why I kind of wanted to talk about that, because a lot of times mariners are there's a misunderstanding. But let's get into it. So yesterday I got a great question from Cheesy Poofs. Says, would you please make a video on how and where to find jobs as an ordinary seaman? I got my TWIC and my merchant marine credentials, but I have no idea where to start. There are so many terms, boats, endorsements. I don't know what I'm able to work on as an ordinary seaman. I don't have a preference. I just want decent pay and to get sea time. And this is the dilemma of everybody that goes into the merchant mariner field and doesn't have somebody that had the experience ahead of them to kind of help them along the way. So let's get into it a little bit here. And I want to talk about, first off, thank you for the question, Cheesy Poofs. And the most important thing is the documentation. And you said that you have your NMC and your TWIC. There are some other things that you're going to need along the way. And beyond just your NMC and your TWIC card, you might need a passport. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the documents and certifications that everybody has to have if you want to work deep sea. So if you want to be able to go to other countries outside America, one, you have to have a passport. So that is a major document that you need to obtain along the way. Next, you need to make sure that in your merchant marine credentials, you have basic safety training or basic training, BST. So, and what does that all entail? That entails courses that you took either at a maritime school, one of the academies, or Military Sea Lift Command also does that training when you get hired from Military Sea Lift Command. So a lot of times people are like, just get your TWIC in NMC, and you can get a job working as a merchant mariner. Now, if you go to work for Military Sea Lift Command, they're going to give you that training. Or if you join one of the unions, they can get you into the schoolhouses to get you that training. You can pay for it along the way. Now, that's not cheap, but let's talk about some of the things that are kind of entailed in that. I talked about basic safety training. That breaks down to certain courses under that block, and that is personal survival, so water survival, learning how to float or swim, firefighting, because if you are on a ship and there's a fire, you need to help put it out because there is no 911 to call when that ship's out to sea. Everybody on board is part of the fire party. First aid, if somebody gets hurt, injured, a lot of boats and ships don't have captains. Now, there are medical first responder courses that typically there's somebody on the ship that's required to have it, usually the ship's master, or if they do have a medic on board, they'll have the qualifications to like triage you more in depth. But everybody on board the ship has to have basic first aid just to, in case something happens, to hopefully save your life enough to get you off the boat or the ship to a hospital if you have very severe injuries. Next is just your personal safety devices and personal safety. Everything from health and wellness, just on board the ship and making sure that you understand like transmittable diseases and all different types of things like that. And then on top of that, as an ordinary seaman, if you ever want to steer a ship or drive a boat, you need to have what they call RFP&W, which is rate forming part of the navigational watch. So to get your RPFW, it's another course that you take at a schoolhouse, and that more or less trains you how to steer a ship if you have no experience of doing that. So those are some of the courses and documentation and certificates that you need to get, and you need to send it off to the Coast Guard and get them into your Merchant Marine credentials. So if you don't have that, that would be probably step one to make yourself be able to get a job. Now, if you don't have the money to take those courses and you didn't join the union and want to go to a union house or didn't go to one of the academies and you don't want to, the last option would probably be Military Sea Lift Command. And I always say that Military Sea Lift Command is a great place to start if you don't really have a lot of money. The biggest down part about Military Sea Lift Command is the wait times to get hired, especially for entry level. And typically they want you to go in as a steward utility first to kind of get you out there, but you'll get a lot of that training along the way. So, but that's in other videos covered on my channel. You can check that out. So let's get into it. How to find a job once you get all those credentials in your pocket or on your credentials or on your NMC. So the first part, I'm going to say the most important part of finding a job is your locality, where you are physically at. Because anybody that's hiring you, they want to hire local if possible. Because some companies and unions and whatnot, they have to pay for your travel back and forth to the ship sometimes. If you're local, they don't have to pay nothing. But if you've lived all the way across the country and they got to pay to move you back and forth, they don't want to hire you because you're not local. So the locality that you're in will probably help a little bit on getting a job starting out, especially as an ordinary seaman. Next, if you don't, other than locality, let's talk about Military Sea Lift Command. And I talked about this already, but if you don't have a lot of money, that's a good step to go. Next is joining the unions or the union academies. Paul Hall, which is SIU, or MEBA for engineering. Those are great union halls to join to start to get experience out there. Now, Joining the union hall can be it could be difficult if you're just coming in cold turkey and you didn't go through their training programs. But if you didn't have a lot of that training yet, the rate forming power navigational watch, BST, and those things, I would say Military Sea Lift Command or one of the union halls and apply to go to one of their academies to get training through the company. Next, direct hires. So once you get all those certificates in your MMC, you can go directly to, like, I want to say Maersk and Crowley. Those are the two big shipping companies around the world. You might want to check them out because they do have entry level positions, but you got to check out their websites. And another thing is like the Great Lakes. There are a lot of shipping companies on the Great Lakes, which you have to do a little research. Google shipping companies, Great Lakes, go to their websites and look and see if there's any postings. Usually there's HR representatives for those companies. You can email those people on the HR companies and say, hey, I'm interested. Here's my resume, and put together a really quick resume. Another option would be LinkedIn. If you don't have LinkedIn, make sure you start a LinkedIn account and kind of build yourself a little resume on there if you are going to stay in the merchant mariner fields. And lastly, but the most difficult aspect of it is maybe going through job boards, Indeed and whatnot. Now, here's the thing. There's another myth about the maritime industry right now is that there's this mariner shortage. And when they talk about mariner shortages, there's really not a mariner shortage for startup people because there's lots of people that are always interested in getting into the merchant mariner field. But that's an investment of education, time, and training. So if you've gotten some of those documents done and you do all the other stuff, then you're more valuable to them. But the big shortage for the maritime industry is what I like to consider, and this is my personal opinion, the maritime middle class. So there's a sweet spot for maritime companies when they hire is when they get brand new people, and first you don't know nothing, so you're kind of useless walking around the boat. You're good for cleaning, helping out, an extra hand, but until you get a lot of shipboard experience, you're not a big asset to that company. They are spending money and they want to spend the least amount of money on your training and on you as possible. So as you get more experience, you become more valuable to the company. But the company is always looking at profit margins and they want to keep the costs down. So what they want to do is they want to find mariners that have lots of experience that are willing to do it for a little pay. Well, mariners are not dumb. Once they get the experience, they want to be paid accordingly. So where are the good jobs for the mariner middle class? What about the companies that want to retain good mariners with experience and whatnot? Because a lot of times people have that misconception of what the maritime industry is about. They get into it, and then once they get the experience, they kind of burn out. They're just like, you know what? I'm moving on to something else. I want to have a life. I want to have a family. I want to have all these other things. So that middle class that want to stick around, because captains and people that, stay in the company forever, they get paid and compensated well. There's not a shortage for a lot of shipping companies to find masters of ships because those are high paid jobs. But that middle class where they can get the experience and not pay so much is kind of more difficult. So how do they find that middle class of mariner where they can pay them not so much, or where are the good jobs? A lot of them are like a ship's captain is building his crew, or a company are building their crew. They want to weed out all the problem children. They don't want to deal with anybody that has any kind of issues. So they will compensate and pay people accordingly. But what they want to do is it's all word of mouth. It's all networking. It's all people that have sailed with you previously. So the first thing you need to do when you start out as an ordinary seaman is you just got to get out there and work your butt off and try to get around and get a chance to see different types of boats, get a lot of experience, and just you already hit the nail on the head, the sea time, so that you can upgrade. But word of mouth is probably the most advantageous way of getting a job. I've been on many boats, and quite often when people are in the pool or in the union hall, and like I'll give you an example. I was on a boat on the Great Lakes. We needed a cook. The captain's like, we need to get a cook. It's actually the ABs. It was a smaller tug and barge. The ABs were taking turns cooking. And some cooked a little bit more because some were not such good cooks. But we're like, hey, we need to get a cook. And the cat was like, does anybody know a cook? And one guy was like, yeah, I got a friend, Timmy, who's in the union hall in Norfolk. Let's get him. So they got a hold of the union hall in Norfolk and specifically requested Timmy. And, unlike like Military SEAL Command really doesn't do a whole lot of that for certain positions. They kind of like first into the pool, first out of the pool. But when you get to the union halls, those companies have their chosen and selected people that they want to hire. And a lot of times it's word of mouth. The people that you've sailed with in the past that are like, hey, I know this guy, let's get him. And they bring him to the boat, because if you're on a small boat, everybody wants to have the best cook that's going to cook the meals for you, right? They don't want a little cookie that don't know how to cook nothing or dropping cigarette butts in your stew. So hopefully this helps you out a little bit, guys. I want to say the most important thing about getting a job in the maritime industry is your training and networking and, just doing a good job and persistence. You have to be persistent when you're starting out. You have to knock on doors. You have to send your resume. You have to reach out to HR representatives. And you got to be willing to maybe move to different locations where those ships are or those boats are to get hired, because they want to hire locally sometimes on the smaller boats. So hopefully you guys get some value out of this. If so, make sure you like the channel, subscribe, ask your questions below, because your questions typically turn into my next video's topic, and we will hit you on the next one. Peace.